Hello. Today we're talking about teaching teens decision-making skills. And we have a very special guest, Lori Reichel, and she is a health teacher. She's been teaching health for 30 years. She's now a professor at SUNY Cortland. And she is amazing. She's won a lot of awards, national and local awards. So I'm very happy to have her here. She also is a host of two podcasts. One previous podcast is called Puberty Prof Podcast. She talks everything about sex education and how to teach kids decision making around sexuality or how to teach sex education. And now she started this year Health Educators Podcast, brand new podcast. So excited to hear about that this evening. Hi, Lori. Thanks for coming.
Hi, Jodi. Thanks so much for having me tonight.
So we're talking about teen decision making, teaching teens decision making skills. I think this is so huge for their emotional wellness, their life skills, their life, their relationships. Tell me how you approach this topic.
Just to let folks know that in health education, like some of us, when we went to school, it was more lecture-based, scare tactics kind of stuff. Don't do drugs, don't have sex. If you do, this negative stuff is going to happen. So when you look at the national standards for health education, 7 of the 8 that we have are skill-based. And one of the skills is decision-making. So basically what we're trying to do is have health teachers get updated or train the new ones to be skill-based. So for decision-making, actually, that's one that can get a little dry because it sounds like it's a little boring. Decisions. Yet the reality is, but we make that. How many do we make in a day? Even before we started recording, how many decisions did you make, Jodi?
I don't know, like 20 or 30.
Yeah. I was like, okay, half an hour beforehand. Do I do my yoga before, after? I have to prep for tomorrow. What am I going to wear for tomorrow? Like all these decisions. So we basically, like how we introduce decision making is that we talk about like decisions, they're continuous throughout our days. And as we grow up, they increase in number. So if you look at a kindergartner, they make certain decisions throughout the day. And then we want children as they reach older and older ages to make more and more decisions because ultimately they're going to be an adult and we want them to be happy and healthy adults. So for them to learn about a decision-making process, we have to teach them one. So after going like over just the basics of decision making and the importance of it. And actually, one of my favorite activities is when I have people, I get volunteers and I have like 7 bags in front of the classroom and they have to choose what bag they would pick and whatever's in the bag they would keep. So the volunteers like have to tell me how they make decisions, because how the bag looks, the number on the bag and stuff. And then we have them like touch the bag, shake the bag and stuff so they can understand the more information they have before making a final decision, they're more prepared. So we introduce it in like a cutesy way as much as possible. And then we start breaking down the steps of, well, how do we actually make decisions? And there's a couple of models out there. Some people use a decide model, which basically is about what's the decision. And then I'm actually even forgetting those steps because I like the power model. I could look it up real fast. I'm going to do a little bit of a cheat sheet if you don't mind, the decide, because I like the power model.
Yeah, what's the power model?
The power model, the decide is define the problem, establish criteria, consider the alternatives, identify the best alternative, and make the decision, and then evaluate the decision. The power model is that you have a problem or predicament. I like the word predicament, if I can only say it a little bit better because it's more positive than problem.
Oh, yeah.
And then what are your options? That's the O in the power model. The W is what are the consequences for options? And then E is enact a plan. What are you going to do regarding this decision? And then the R is reflect and revise. And the reason why I like this power model is because I like to explain to young people that if there's something that's going on, let's say you're hanging out and somebody finds like a cousin's vape pen. And they're like, oh, look, vanilla flavored. And it's, what do you want to do? If you go, whatever, I don't know, you're giving your power away. So what I ask people to do is
not deciding is actually a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not, If I let you decide for me, I am giving my power away to you.
Yeah.
And the reality is, this is my decision. It's my body. For vaping, what is it that I want to do? Am I curious about it? And people are curious about it. But when you break it down into a decision making model, you start exploring like each step a little bit more. So if I use that example of vaping, and tell me if I'm going too fast or
No,
too
it's great.
slow
No, it's great.
or whatever. But if you use the power model for something like vaping, so the predicament is being offered, do you want to try this vanilla flavored vape or whatever? So that's the predicament. And then you look at the options in which I can say, no, no thanks. I might take it. Another option would be take and pretend I'm using it. Another option is to actually try it. Another option is to say, well, I've already done it before and I didn't like it. But there's a bunch of options that we want children to explore.
It's
And
almost
one,
it's almost like teaching them brainstorming skills.
yes,
I talk about that
yes,
a lot because I think that sometimes we think there's only one answer or there's only one way to
yeah,
make meaning or one way to understand or one perception. But if we teach them to have this is great. I love this model because it's teaching there's a lot of different things in each
yes.
letter that
Mhm.
if you explore it and try to think that's developing that prefrontal cortex and decision making and problem solving so that we see more often options, we're less and less limited. And I think that has a secondary positive effect on improving our mental health actually.
Mhm. And I love how you bring that up. Like when we're teaching in the health education classroom, we're also supposed to be teaching self management skills, like what breathing technique might help you just to pause for a moment. Because as you said, that prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. So if we can slow down the thinking process just for a moment, so I can go, wait a minute. And maybe it's even to say, wait, I have to go to the bathroom. I'll come right back. So when you go into the bathroom,
Oh
you can
yeah.
go through those steps in your head of, okay, what is that brainstorming? What are my options? And when we talk about decision making that we see, it's not only one option, not two, but there has to be a third and a fourth. You might not have thought about it.
Mm. So it's
So
like a
if we can,
challenging yourself is don't stop at just two options.
yes,
Challenge yourself to keep thinking because that gives you time to think of something you might
yes,
not have thought of before. Like in that urgency, we just go to something simple or we go to blame or but if you
hmm,
have time, you're expanding this perception and thinking of something you might not have thought of, and that might be the better option. Is that what you're saying?
yeah,
I love it.
hmm,
I love it.
yeah. And when with more practice, that's why we teach it to young people. And it's weird, like some people would be like, well, it sounds really dry, and it can get that way. Yet it's brilliant because if you are teaching a health class and you're like, okay, let's talk about the decision regarding vaping. And then let's talk about this decision regarding marijuana use. And do you know all the consequences upon certain people using it? If you have schizophrenia in the genetic background or whatever, I want you to do research. I'm not saying drugs are bad. It's more, what is the relationship you want to have with substances? And let's utilize this model so you can make the best decisions for you because it's your power. You make the decision.
I love it. So W is what are the consequences of each option? So
Each
you're
option.
weighing that. So
Hmm.
you're brainstorming. And as part of brainstorming, you're imagining if I did this would
Yep.
happen. If I did this would happen. These are also
Hmm.
great skills to have. Foresight, having foresight into
Hmm.
what might happen if you go on each path. These are powerful skills. Decision making skills are a lot of skills in one. I'm just
Yes.
thinking of it like that. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then E is making an action plan. So once you decide,
Yep. Enact a
uh,
plan.
then you might have a few steps to that plan or whatever, or
Yep.
maybe it's one step. And then R is review and then revise if
Hmm.
necessary.
Yep. I use the phrase reflect and
Oh,
revise.
reflect. Okay.
I like, and I like that reflection because a part of what young people sometimes miss, and sometimes we as adults, is that young people are going to learn from mistakes and they need to reflect on it instead of being like, oh, I can't make a mistake. I
Mm.
have to be perfect. No, sometimes the best way you learn is to mess up. And sometimes that means I have to apologize. Maybe I said something wrong or phrased something in an email and I'm sorry, Jodi. Or maybe it's that I did something, I thought that's who I was at the time. But in retrospect, that's not who I am. This is who I choose to be. So the next time around, I can make a healthier decision.
Yeah. So our actions reflect our
Yeah.
purposes, our intentions. Yeah, I like that. There was something you said I was gonna bring up. You were talking about perfectionism, and I think that is a really
Hmm.
key player because I think the worry that we're not gonna get it perfect is what stalls people with decision making.
Yeah.
And that stalling, that freezing, and not being able to make decision has a lot of negative consequences on a
Yeah.
person. One is they might miss opportunities. One, they might upset people around them because they're delaying or whatever. And uh, how they feel about themselves is often affected by being
Yep.
stalled and not making decisions. And when we try to be perfect, I think about perfectionism as the biggest waste of time, right? There's
Yeah.
so much time wasted trying to be perfect because you're never going to get there. It's unrealistic. It's undefinable. And so you could just try forever and
Yeah.
never make it, right? Never succeed and then always feel bad. But I think it's so connected with decision making if they can let go of that a little bit. So
Hmm.
I like when to call it a reflection instead of review and really make sure they know we're not assessing you. We're not judging. Did I do it right? Because
Right.
there might not be a wrong way. You make the decision and then you make that your decision. I learned that I have a story when I just remembered, I forgot we were talking about this tonight, but when I was in college, I was trying to decide between a boyfriend and I wanted to travel and I didn't know what to do with my life. And so I had a professor then that said to decide means to kill. Like the base of the word,
Hmm.
like DEC is right to kill, like deceased. And so you're killing the other option. And so, yes, you go through the process and decide what's the best and you're making a conscious choice. But really, then you just make that choice your choice
Hmm.
instead of like, regretting and going back and being like, did I do it right? Am I okay? Which is what a lot of people do. But just to
Yeah.
say, you're letting go of that other thing and you're making this the right one. Like, we have a part in making it the right choice once we make it, right?
Mm. And to trust that even if it's not going the way we thought it would once we make the decision, to trust the process. Because, like the whole perfectionism, like what you explained, it's weird that, like, for young people, developmentally, they feel like they have to be perfect. And maybe because we give more attention, negative attention, when something we don't like happens. Oh, you can't do that. And we're so busy that we give more attention to the negative. So we try to avoid the negative. Yet it's to have a young person to come up and go, you know what? I messed up. I screwed up. Yeah, we screw up. And sometimes the screw ups are just like, those are the opportunities to be like, what do I do next? I remember a high school student who came into homeroom one day and he had a tattoo. And I was like, what happened? It was all infected and everything. He went to the doctors and I was like, he wasn't in my health class, but he was in my homeroom. And I had an illegal or a fake ID, went into New York City, went to a place that I didn't check out, and this is what happened. And I was like, all right, so did we learn something? He's like, yes. And can I go talk to your students in your class to say, listen, I made a mistake. If you're going to get a tattoo, please make sure you have a parental unit with you. Please make sure it's inspected by the health advisor and stuff. And I was like, it's a way that we learn. And that's okay. It's okay. And I know sometimes at the college level, students are afraid not to get like a 10 out of 10. And but you're in college to learn
Yeah.
and you're not
Like
going to
the
get it
point is lost,
perfect.
right?
Right. But this, I have to get a 4.0 where everything has to be perfect. I hate to tell you folks, but even me, I have 30 something years experience. I still make a mistake. I still on the syllabus, the date might be wrong because
And
it's
no
just
one's
part of
really
life.
gonna know your GPA after nobody knows. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's really yeah. we just have there's these unrealistic expectations of our culture that are so
Yeah.
high, but we really feel like we have to meet them to have a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
It's not true, but that pressure will always leave us inadequate. So we really have to
Mhm.
take these expectations down to something realistic, which is a great thing to teach in health class as well, right?
Yes.
Talking
Yeah.
about
Mhm.
realistic versus unrealistic expectations. It
Yeah.
was funny because when you were talking about mistakes and how they help us learn, we're so much better for making mistakes. We just
We are.
expand. I had an old blog post that I wrote a long time ago that was like, I learned so much from mistakes. I'm going to make a bunch of them. Like I was just like flipping the script a little bit on what our connotations that are negative and changing them to every time I make a mistake, I learn so much. So I'm just going to jump
Mhm.
in, right?
Yeah.
Start before you're ready. Just it's better to try than to not do anything at all because you're afraid of making mistakes. So I think these lessons are really important for people this age because those unrealistic expectations are getting higher and higher, especially with technology and everything.
Yeah. And I like to tell young people sometimes they make the decision in the moment because they're hearing what other people want to decide to do. And it's like, how can you pause so you can really get connected to yourself? And sometimes it's like going for a walk in nature or not being around people, even for a couple of minutes or something, because you have the answers. And sometimes people ask for too much advice, but it's the answers are there. I need you to be brave enough to hear it, especially when your answers are not in alignment with everybody else's. And that's okay. You're on your own life path. Take the ride you bought the ticket for.
And I like that. So if they have a little bit of time, they have some time to ground themselves
Mhm.
and reflect what they really want. And then in that time, it gives them that chance to grow enough bravery to come back.
Yeah.
It's a really good
Mhm.
tactic, actually. It's a really good strategy for not responding right away because
Mhm.
it's easy or it's like a knee jerk or you're
Yeah.
responding out of fear, but to take some time and really ground yourself. I like that
Yeah.
take a walk. I'm a big proponent of walking.
Yeah.
I saw in your bio you talked about hiking and the
Oh, love
waterfalls in your
hiking.
area. So
Oh,
such a
yeah.
beautiful
Mhm.
place, New York State,
Yeah.
Cortland, and
Yeah.
so beautiful.
And there's this fun activity in case you have some health educators that are listening in, or even families can talk about this. There's an activity that we do where it's you get two volunteers and they act out like they're kind of asking one another out or to hang out, whatever they want to call it these days and stuff. And then you create the scenario where their parental unit is not around and one of them invites the other over for dinner. And what would you make? And they have candles and they have music. And I actually have fake candles in the classroom and I lower the lights and I put on some music, yeah, sultry music. And then I actually put up a blanket as if they're on the couch now. And I put up a blanket so the audience can't see anything more, like the other students in the
Mhm.
classroom. And then the couple that's been role playing, I'm like, okay, throw this. And I have clothing in a bag that they start throwing over. And then I pause everything. And it's very funny. Like it's a very funny scene. And I call it in the moment because then we process what's the reality about being in the moment. We're sitting there and we're having a good time and we're feeling like, oh, this is nice. And the dopamine is being released, the serotonin, the oxytocin, maybe if you're holding hands or and then you're like, your hands are wandering and stuff like that. And this is why, if you can think beforehand, wait a minute, what am I really ready for? And take a pause. This is where we want young people to do that because the brain's not fully developed in the moment. All of us, no matter what age, can get lost in the moment. And if there's substances like alcohol or other drugs, that also alters the decision making process. So to teach the steps to go into a situation and go, who am I? What might happen here? That's what we're trying to do with young people.
That's great. What a great activity.
It's fun.
I bet you it's fun, and it's funny. I think the humor, like using humor, I'm sure you use it a
Mhm.
lot because I've listened to several of your episodes of health educator podcast. great show. Everyone should go take a
Thank
look
you.
at it. Health Educators Podcast. You use fun and humor a
Mhm.
lot
Mhm.
to like skills-based activities, right? Get them out of their
Yes.
seat, doing stuff, funny
Mhm.
role plays,
Yep.
because humor is like it increases our neuroplasticity, right? So that they're
Yes.
taking in, they're learning, it's like staying in. Um, it's so impactful. They will not
Mhm.
forget that. They won't forget
No.
that lesson.
I hope so. I hope so. I've been really fortunate. I've had students that note that my intent is not to tell them what to do because I can share my history, yet they're not living my life. Even future teachers, I'm like, don't be me. Take some of
Yeah.
the skills I have and rework them. Be you, yet to help guide them because I want them to be the happiest and healthiest they can be because life can be really great. It's very challenging. And that's where our decision making is really needed when it gets really challenging. But yeah, to care for kids, to I do believe in the future. I actually had the good fortune to go into a fifth grade classroom the other day to observe a newer teacher and seeing these fifth graders and how actually there was a little activity going on by me where I was sitting and they were smelling like some products that somebody might decide to use if their armpits are smelling. And they're like, oh, I like this. I like this. And I was like, not everybody uses it. They don't have to decide to use a product. That's a cultural thing too. We just have to wash the armpits sometimes. But then there's all these different scents. Some are deodorants, some are more antiperspirants and stuff. But seeing their excitement in the classroom, it just gives me faith for the future because there's kids are great. I just think they're
Just so
wonderful.
great. They
They are.
just are. Oh yeah. They do give us hope because they're
Yes.
excited about stuff. They learn, they're growing, they're asking questions that are making
Hmm.
us wonder and think.
Yeah.
Um, I was just reflecting also back on that in the moment exercise that you do, and I think that probably those kids who went through that exercise in your classroom, they think about that when they're on dates
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
when they're making those decisions, it's gonna come up, right? That
Yep.
correlation between that they felt it so strongly and laughed, and then
Yes.
when they were in a situation where they're by themselves with the person and they're like, "What are we gonna do?"
What are we gonna
Um,
do?
it brings
Yep.
I'm sure that tethers them into that decision-making process. I love skills-based learning.
Yeah, me too. It's a different way of teaching, and that's what even when we talk to young people, I know that sometimes we get very protective of our children and youth, yet we have to let them figure things out at times, be there for them. They have to practice these skills. They have to that phrase helicopter parent and then what is it? Snowplow parent.
Yeah, I forgot what that one was. What is the snowplow one? Even worse?
That's when a parental unit comes in and just tries to plow a
Mm.
clear path so they have no like
Oh,
friction and stuff. And the reality is kids
okay.
need that. They need to
Need
trip
that.
up.
They
They
need to
need
practice,
to.
they need to make mistakes and
Yeah.
know how to recover.
Yes. Yes. And
Yeah.
that you as a parental unit, you can't always be there to fix it. You
No.
have to let them figure out, okay, now I did this. How do I fix it? That's part of the growth and the growth mindset, of, okay, so I messed up. So how do I get better from this? What do I
Do it
do?
better the next time. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. They need to learn little challenges so that later on they could learn how to approach bigger challenges.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Decision making and problem solving is so interconnected, or predicament solving. Let's not say problem solving. Predicament solving.
Either one.
Hmm.
Yep.
It's such a great activity for to really enforce that prefrontal cortex. The stronger that is, the more alive and
Hmm.
used to working,
Yeah.
the less anxiety and depression people have, because we have so many thoughts a day because we evolved for millions of years to survive in this crazy world, and
Yeah.
we don't need to problem solve as much as we did 100 years ago or 200 years ago. And so that those leftover thoughts or that leftover mind energy, it
Yeah.
just gets taken up with negative thoughts. And so detrimental. So we have to go back to reminding them that they're incredible problem solvers. We're incredibly adaptable. Our brain is just, it's not them. It's
Yeah.
innate there, right? It's for forever. And so to get them back into knowing themselves as skilled is what this generation seems to be missing. They have
'Cause you're
skills, they
right.
just don't know what they do.
Yeah, and that genetic part of the fight or flight and freeze and the this is gonna happen, like, we have that negative thought pattern at times, especially too, you put on the news or you hear all the drama
Mm.
on certain shows and stuff, and to have that, "Wait a minute, I need to make a decision here. Why am I going down this negative path? I need to turn it around. Am I anxious about something? Or is it that I'm just, like, repeating what I was taught by this person or, whatever it is to be like, let's be in the moment right now. I'm safe. I'm okay."
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Lori. It's been really great talking to you and hearing and thinking about decision making and the power it has in all of our lives. Like it's a dry skill. We use it constantly.
Mhm.
And when with decision making, it increases our adrenaline actually, and our brains, wait, she's hesitating. What's wrong? And it
Mhm.
starts some things. So stalling in decision making is so problematic in a lot of ways. So teaching young people how to make decisions, this is great advice for teachers, for counselors, for parents, and for teens themselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
starting young, you said in the beginning, you said start
Yeah.
young, helping them make
And
decisions.
I thank you for saying that because you even used the word power in there, which I love. And I want to say thank you for making the decision to have this podcast because you're educating, you're reaching so many people. And I really appreciate our conversation before we even started recording that you care about kids. And to do something like this podcast in which you care and to offer, like, for families and teachers and counselors, like, another tool for them to connect with so they can be stronger for the kids, for the children and youth. So thank you for
That's
what
what it's
you're
all
doing,
about.
Jodi.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you all for watching and listening. And those of you in the recording, those of you live, I'm on every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern. So you could come watch me. And if you want reminders for the show, you could come on over to jodieamon.com/guide. And you, as a bonus, you get my Generation Z mental health resource guide. It's a comprehensive guide for parents, teachers, and counselors how to help this generation feel better about themselves. I'll see you next week. But until then, remember you are so much more than you know that you are. Good night.
Bye, everyone.